I'm here with Chris from Goldbrick Productions, a stop-motion animation YouTube channel, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk to him and see what makes him tick, why does he do what he does, and maybe get a little insight into the wonders of stop-motion animation. So, hi Chris.
Hey Captain, how's it going?
It's going great, thank you. So, tell me a little bit about yourself. How long have you been doing this?
Let's see. I've been seriously brick filming for about a decade now. I did a little bit just kind of on and off as a kid with old camcorders and webcams, but I only really seriously got into it around 2011 when Ninjago released. That was sort of what helped propel me for the first few steps. And then since then, I've just been trying to refine my skills and get along with whatever trends LEGO's currently working on. It's been quite a ride so far.
You started with Ninjago, but now you've evolved. I mean, I've seen your videos and your channels. I mean, you've done quite a lot of different stuff, not solely on stop motion. And then you've ended up having kind of a bit of a series with regular characters, with fun, wacky adventures.
Well, a lot of my films stemmed from just trying to take a regular LEGO theme and kind of trying to spin it. But then as I started realizing that there were more brick filmers out there, and honestly quite a few more than I expected to ever find as a kid, I noticed that there were a lot of series that revolved around having two roommates. So you have, say, Silly Penta's Benny and Lee, or Chris Lacey's Mini Life TV. I think Ben and Andy is another one still somewhat running. And the draw of some of these shows is that you could just take two minifigures, have everything rely off of dialogue in a small set, and it's quite an easy way to put together a story and kind of create a little bit of a universe. And so I did exactly the opposite of that. I had the two minifigures, but next thing you know, I was creating way too large scale sets and way too crazy of dialogue and whatnot. I just figured, if I have these characters and I just kind of run with them my way, I wanted to kind of make it a little comedy adventure series, sort of taking elements from, say, Phineas and Ferb, or a little bit of that adventure random style from Ninjago, or even just some common sitcom elements from, say, The Office or Parks and Rec. So it's just kind of a big mishmash of ideas, and the fact that I had enough LEGO to make it happen.
Right. Yeah, because you do need a lot of that. And how does the process work? How do you do all the animation? Because I guess it's one frame at a time. So do you actually do work to 30 frames a second, or do you sort of scale it back down?
Oh, thankfully, I have scaled it back. I go around 15 frames per second. There was some times where I was experimenting closer to 24 or 30 or so, but I found that in order to get really comedic movement, you kind of want it a little bit choppy, because it helps remind the audience that they are LEGO. If you go too fast, it feels just a bit too smooth, at least for the sort of fast-paced comedy that I'm trying to go for. So usually I try to stick around that range unless it's something really experimental.
The first video that I bumped into on YouTube, which was made by you, is the video when you talked about the Antikythera mechanism. And I was quite impressed with actually the wackiness and the sense of humor that you've got. And even in an interesting historical video that you made, it was so interesting to watch because it was just quite zany in a way. You've always managed to find humor in different places, which keeps the viewer interested, or kept me interesting anyway. What gave you the idea to do that video?
Well, that video was actually part of a collaboration by a group called Brick Film Day. So they had an event revolving around history. And usually when it comes to events or contests, I usually try to take the theme and run with it in a somewhat opposite direction that I think people will expect. So for previous contests where the theme was, say, discovery, I try to revolve around failing to discover something. Or when it was compromise, a character who refuses to compromise on something. And so for the history event, I figured a lot of people were going to go with events, different wars or different moments in history. I wanted to try and revolve around like an object or an artifact. And I looked through a big list of really obscure inventions, and I found the Antikythera mechanism. I just thought it was really interesting. I got a little bit of background in engineering. That's what I do professionally. And I found it really just fascinating that the ancient Greeks were able to construct such a complex mechanical device. But then, of course, I realized it probably wasn't quite as easy as just throwing it together and throwing it at the bottom of the ocean. So that's why I wanted to add the comedic stab of, if we don't know where it's from, let me offer up an idea, a really silly idea, but one that might make the audience laugh a bit and just appreciate how complex this thing actually was.
Yeah, because it was about a student trying to finish his end-of-year project. That was hilarious. And I think you did that because you were probably a student at the time.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm still studying a little bit, so it's just a repeated cycle of crazy project, lots of late nights and caffeine. But that one kind of was more inspired by my senior design project, where we spent a lot of late nights working on stuff. Funny enough, it did end up going, underwater, but that was the intended design because it was a submarine.
Right.
As for the Antikythera mechanism, I don't think it was intended for underwater use.
No, I don't think so either. It was quite a remarkable piece of engineering, I must say, especially for so long ago. So how long does it take you to make one of these videos?
It really depends on the scope of the project. Generally, if I finish a 2 or 3 minute animation, and if I'm not doing anything really experimental, I can usually finish in about a week. My latest brick film that I did, Ninjago Prime Empire Panic, that one was specifically for a week-long contest. So I pretty much condensed everything down in about 6 or 7 days and just animated and edited like the wind. But I've had much larger scale projects that have taken months, even when it was a full year to complete.
Which one is that?
Let's see. I believe Bob and Randy episode 3 took exactly a year, and then Bob and Randy episode 4 was about 11 months. So I shaved a month off of my record time, which I guess is something, I guess.
3 and 4, is that the ones about the secret bakers?
Yeah, the Freebaker Association.
The Freebakers, yeah. Blimey, over a year to do, yeah, well, it kind of makes sense when you think. I mean, it's complex little videos and smart little stories. So how does the design process work? Do you start with an idea? Do you start with a thinking of creating the mocks that you need to create the scenes? How does it all work?
It's sort of a combination of both of those elements. So often for contests and festivals, I already have the theme and I kind of work it in another direction. Other times it just manifests as a random idea. I know one of my favorites this year has been my Doom Eternal parody. I just saw random Doom memes revolving around the Revenant and the trumpet sound effects. And so I just decided, you know what? I'm going to do that, but Lego. And then oftentimes it's more complex. I'm currently working on a script for the next Bob and Randy episode with a special cameo, if you know what I mean. And that one's been a little bit more tricky because I have this general theme in my head, but then trying to connect the dots as I go has been tricky. And so one thing I'll do, I'll start just putting together random bits and pieces out of my Lego and just sort of see what sort of minifigure designs stand out or different props. Just try to see if I could build something and then make the story revolve around that accordingly.
A year, 11 months. So the script writing process, how long does that take for the one you're currently working on? I mean, is it done, or have you, obviously I've got a vested interest in knowing a bit about this.
Well, the first page is done. It looks pretty good. The other pages are a jumbled mess. The scene with the special cameo is pretty much done in my head. Now it's just a matter of writing it out. I guess, you know, for the sake of making it clear to the viewers, Captain Mutant here is the special cameo. And one thing I've been trying to do is go back through all your videos and figure out like your talking style, the regular tones you use and whatnot. So that way, as I write your character's interactions with my world, it feels like, you know, it's actually your character talking with the characters I've introduced. Just a lot of little nuanced stuff like that to make sure that the script it flows, it feels like it's actual people talking, and that every element that I introduce gets wrapped up in some way at the end.
Cool. So which apps do you use to do your stop motion animation? I mean, do you use a special camera? Do you just use your phone? How does it all work?
A lot of people do use smartphones and little point and shoot cameras for their work. And if you're a beginner, I highly recommend using a smartphone because it's far easier today than it was 10 years ago. But for my setup, I have a DSLR right here. So this is just my Canon Rebel 2400. And then I have Dragon Frame over here. And let's see if my remote wants to connect to it for a demo. Dead battery. Okay, we're using the regular keyboard. Improvise, adapt, overcome, they say. And so what I'll do is I'll load my camera up in this window here. And I can go under and check my cinematography settings. So I've kind of lowered the quality of this just for the sake of getting a clean setup for this talk here. But often here's where I'm choosing my color profile. I can change the camera settings as need be appropriately. And then when I'm done there, I can just stick in my audio to line it up with the pictures I want to take. And after all that prep is done, I can go ahead and I can start just taking pictures right here. And then if I want to move around my figures or whatnot, there's additional settings. If I want to sync it with the video track, there's a whole lot of different settings. But yeah, I absolutely love Dragon Frame. It's used by Aardman Animations and Leica, who are basically the two giants in the stop motion industry. So it's been a program that served me very well.
And then what, do you have like some kind of onion skinning or something so you can see what's moved and what hasn't moved when you're just making complex animations with this app?
I do, actually. So it's this little slider down here at the bottom. So from the last picture I took here, I haven't moved anything. But if I say remove, let's remove these guys here. It'll be very evident. You can see that there's this little ghost overlay right here where they used to be.
Yeah.
And I could change how prevalent the overlay is. And I'll often use that as a comparison to figure out where the minifigure was in the last shot. Or if I accidentally bump something, like say this guy here in the back, there's just enough ghosting around him that I can go ahead and readjust until he's back in the shot. So it's honestly a lifesaver. I used to have a software that didn't have onion skinning. I can't believe I got anything done.
No, I know that. I mean, in my own attempt at stop motion animation, which is just building sets and building them up as they go, sort of like by magic.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes if I move something by mistake, I said, oh, where exactly was it? So I've been lucky. Most of the time you just brush it aside, the fact that it's moved a little bit, and there's not too much difference. But onion skinning would be a huge advantage, especially for something as complex as the videos you do recently compared to what you used to do 9-10 years ago. I mean, your skills have greatly improved, and your humor has remained pretty much the same, actually, I've noticed.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I was thinking about Brickman, one of the 10-13 second animations you've got about this.
Oh, no, that's a throwback.
I thought that kind of humor is exactly the same as what you've got now, and it's just a zaniness and a craziness, very fast, especially back then. Now you take more of your time, and I thought it was quite interesting to sort of talk to you and just find out a little bit more about you. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I guess the one thing that always comes to mind is that I'm no man's an island, certainly with really complex video work and whatnot. So I'm really indebted to a lot of the community, especially my friends over at Frame 100. There's just a whole network of people who do brick filming and Lego animation, and they're just super friendly and helpful and inviting. So pretty much anytime I have an opportunity to talk about what I do and how much I love it and whatnot, I always got to remember to thank those guys because they always have my back, which I appreciate.
That is a good, interesting point as well, because actually I've noticed there is a lot of stop-motion animation based around Lego. And you mentioning Aardman is interesting as well, because actually they've moved away from stop-motion. I mean, that was how they started, but now they're doing more CGI stuff. So do you think that stop-motion is something that is going to carry on in the future?
I think so. I think one parallel example that comes to mind is traditional 2D or hand-drawn animation. Granted, we don't have artists who sit at tables drawing hundreds upon thousands of pictures at once, but you see the influences of 2D still carry on today, especially in a lot of modern anime or a couple of Western films. I think Klaus is a really good one that comes to mind. I think part of the fun of stop motion is that anybody can do it, and it's simple to learn, hard to master. I think that's definitely part of the appeal. Plus, one thing that comes to advantage for a lot of stop motion and brick filmers is that the assets are already made for you. So you don't have to try and sculpt out your own minifigure. You don't have to draw one from scratch. It's all right there in front of you. And that saves a lot of time on, say, storyboarding or working on concepts, because you can quickly jump into the themes that you want to drive in your story or the sort of lighting and camera setup that you want to capture it. Now, granted, Lego does sort of have limits as a medium, but it's surprisingly more flexible than I think most people give it credit for. And just because of the tactile nature and the imperfections of stop motion, I think there's always going to be an appeal for it, whether or not that appeal is at a max or a min.
No, very good points, and I do agree with you that, yes, Lego's there, you can just pick it up and start playing with this, and it can be an appeal to anybody. I mean, even with a phone, you could just grab a phone, put it on a tripod, and take a few frames as you go, and any attempt would work. So, yeah, you're right. It would, I'm a big fan. I wish I had your patience and your skill to do what you do, because I always enjoy those kind of things, and they always make me smile. And in 2020, I think it's always important to be able to smile now and again.
Fully agreed.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to your next video when it's ready to come out.
Yeah, thank you, Captain. Really appreciate it. I'm always down to talk about brick filming, so this is a lot of fun.